Bring to us your poetry from inspiration sought. Come, join us with your images, your verses, words, and thought. From here, we'll share your balladry with those who do not know it. This platform's here for you to show the world that you're the poet.
Welcome to episode 26 of You're the Poet, the poetry podcast featuring you. I'm host Matt Burgio, and I'm here with co-host Phil Burgio. Phil, welcome.
Happy to be here.
Here at You're the Poet, our purpose is to share our love of poetry with the world and invite you to do the same. I want to start by saying thank you to all of our listeners who have made You're the Poet possible. We hope you enjoy the podcast and the poetry that is shared here. Our featured guest for this episode of You're the Poet is Jacob Pearcey, who is joining us from Texas. Jacob, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
We're glad you could join us, and we look forward to your contribution to the episode. To start things off, I'm going to share a classic poem for the episode. Looking at poets for this episode, I decided to go back to the 16th century and do some research on English poet and politician Sir Thomas Wyatt. Sir Thomas Wyatt lived from 1503 to 1542. He was from Kent in England. He was involved with the court of Henry VIII. He had a long-time relationship with Anne Boleyn, and there's speculation whether or not there may have been a love affair between them, but there's no direct evidence for that. They were longtime friends and knew each other growing up, but there's some speculation that they might have had an affair. And I think some of that might have had to do with the fact that Wyatt was known for having other affairs as well. His principal patron was Thomas Cromwell, and he's credited with introducing the sonnet to English literature along with Henry Howard, the Earl of Surrey. They're both known as the fathers of the English sonnet. This is 20 years before the birth of Shakespeare, who really made the English sonnet popular. So they studied a lot of Petrarch's sonnets, the Italian sonnet, and Wyatt translated many of Petrarch's sonnets, and he imitated them in his work, though he would typically end his sonnets with the rhyming couplet in the sestet, and this was something that was made popular by him and Howard. And then later on, Shakespeare would take Howard's form of the sonnet, and it would become known as the English sonnet or the Shakespearean sonnet, even though the form of the four quatrains with the rhyming couplet at the end was invented long before, or not long before Shakespeare, but some 20-some years before Shakespeare was born. So Wyatt's poems were published in Toddle's Miscellany in 1557, along with Howard's and some other poets of the time. And that first edition was called Songs and Sonnets. There were 271 poems, most of them by Wyatt and Howard. This was the last large use of the sonnet form for several decades in the published world until Philip Sidney published his work in 1591. So the poem I'm going to share today is called My Galley Charged With Forgetfulness, and this is an example of Wyatt's sonnet use. My galley charged with forgetfulness. My galley charged with forgetfulness, through sharp seas and winter nights doth pass, tween rock, and eke mine enemy, alas, that is, my lord, steereth with cruelness, and every hour a thought in readiness, as though that death were light in such a case. An endless wind doth tear the sail apace, of forced sighs and trusty fearfulness. A rain of tears, a cloud of dark disdain, hath done the wearied chord's great hindrance, wreathed with error and eke with ignorance. The stars be hid that led me to this pain. Drowned is reason that should me comfort, and I remain despairing of the port. Sir Thomas Wyatt.
Okay, sounds very, should I say Shakespearean?
I think that's a good way to describe it. He was really intrigued with the poets, especially, like I said, of Petrarch, and really tried to imitate them and bring that to the English audience.
I'm going to have to find a Petrarch poem for a future read.
Yeah, honestly, when I first read that, when you sent it over to me, it definitely hit me. I haven't really read that much poetry in my life, to be honest. Me writing it came out of the blue. So when I read this, it gave me a lot of ideas. At first, I wasn't sure who wrote it because I didn't see the name until the bottom, and I thought it was one of you guys. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting choice of language in your poetry. It's like, where did you come up with that? And then I saw it at the end, and it made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It really resonated with me. You can feel his emotion in it. You can feel that he's just so charged with that emotion. Just reading it, I kind of felt what he was feeling in it. It kind of just hit me in a way that hasn't really happened from a poem before. But I also haven't read that many.
And now I'm going to have to write a poem in the Shakespearean language.
Yeah.
I'm a big Shakespeare fan, but I never wrote a poem, with these and thous and thoses in it. It's
Right.
going to happen.
Yeah, it made me want to do the same thing. Just start getting a little more creative with my language like that.
All right, from here, we're going to turn it over to Phil to share his poetry for the episode. Phil?
My poem is called Red Bird in the Dead Pear Tree. And it's interesting, before I start, while Matt was reading his poem, I looked out and there was a cardinal sitting in a dead branch looking in. So that's kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say supernatural. Anyway, I wrote this poem in 1990 when my boys are little. They're in their 40s now, but they were little weezers then. Red Bird in the Dead Pear Tree. A red bird lit in the dead pear tree, the tree that had given us so much, not only fruit, but blossom sweet, shade and memories. The bird stood out on the winter's day, a contrast to the gray and cold, a red spark to kindle memories of all the tree had given us. In the spring, the blossoms, as thick and soft as fresh snow, filled the air with scents so sweet, sweet perfume on an April day. The summer shade of the now dead tree would cool the gardener's heated brow, a welcome spot to sit on a heated day in July. In the fall, the crowning cycle of the tree, as bushels of fruit would be given up to fill the shelves for our winter store. The tree gave us memories of children playing in the shade and gathering fruit and sampling pears, enjoying the season's last warm days. Memories of our bandit squirrels who called my bluff when I would not shoot, of our cat, the cavalry, who finally routed their thievery. And the final scene I'll keep when thinking of the tree that's past, the thoughts that kindle more memories, the red bird and the dead pear tree. Philip Burgio, 1990.
All right, thank you for sharing. I can visualize this poem, but when I visualize it, I tend to visualize it from the current pear tree that's out there, though I'm pretty sure this is about an older pear tree.
Oh, yeah. That one got hit by lightning, and that's why it was dead.
Wow.
I like the imagery there.
Symbolic.
I was going to make the joke, though, when you sent this to me the other day, to say I really wanted you to change thievery to scrumping.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's
thinking about, so when we had Ryan Morgan on from Ireland, and he read one of his poems about scrumping, about sneaking in and stealing fruit from the orchards over there. So that made me think about that, the squirrels stealing the fruit.
scrumping.
Doing some scrumping. But yeah, good poem, good imagery, good memories.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that a lot more when you read it than when I read it, just because I guess since I haven't read a lot of poetry, the pacing kind of just threw me off because I'm so used to just writing and reading my own that reading through it, I couldn't quite get into the flow of it. But now that I've heard you read it, it honestly just comes together so perfectly well.
We talked about that in past episodes about it's better when you hear somebody reading it. It's like Shakespeare. You can read it, but you don't get the impact that you do when you're watching a live play.
Right.
And same thing with poetry. It's always better when somebody else reads it.
Yeah, I agree. Even when Phil and I are trading poems back and forth, or he'll send me his latest poem and be like, what do you think? Sometimes I'm like, the same way, I'm not getting the flow or it just doesn't work for me. But then I'll just be like, well, hey, read this. And then when he reads it in his style and his flow, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. It sounds good. If you've listened to any of our episodes, just some of the way the poets bring their poetry to life, I'm like, wow, that's not how I read that in my head at all. So it's really cool to hear the spoken poetry. Because I'm right there with you. I do a lot of my poetry just by myself, sort of in the introvert sort of way. So it's interesting to hear it all come to life.
Yeah, definitely. It really did come to life.
Now I want a pear walnut pie.
Sounds good.
It is. We came up with a pear walnut pie, and it's kind of a combination of pecan pie and apple pie, the texture and everything. It's very good.
Yeah, that's a really good mix. I've never even thought about doing that.
Yeah, we wanted to make a pear pie, but when you look them up, a lot of them are just similar to an apple pie. And we were like, nah, we want something different. It's kind of just a single crust pie, and it's got, walnuts and pears mixed together, and it's got more of a
Pecan pie.
almost kind of like a pecan pie kind of feel. It's interesting. Good little recipe that lasted, and it took us a few tries to kind of get it right, but now we've kind of make it every year.
Yeah, send me that recipe after this.
All right.
Yeah.
Will do. All right, so from here, we're going to move to my poem for the episode. This is a recent poem I wrote. Well, I say recent, but really in two parts. I actually started it last winter, and then I finished it earlier this week. This is just a poem about it snowing and sort of the wonder of snow and the hope for snow. I'm one that loves the snow, and so I get excited anytime it starts to snow. This one kind of captures all of that for me as both the poet and the lover of snow and snow days. It's called It Snowed Today. It snowed today. Not the real snow that winter days have me longing for. Lush snow with big flakes, the carpeted, silent landscape, the snow that brings with it anxious hopes of a snow day. This was just a tease, the first flickerings of falling flakes, enough to make me smile. And smile I did. Where others begrudge the snow, or thought of it, I am filled with wonder. Maybe we'll see snow snakes as they scurry across the road, or revealed prints of the feathered and furry, wandering to who knows where. And maybe in time these flurries will flourish to fill up our world with stillness and peace that soon will be broken by laughter and cheer. Not just for poets do snowfalls exist, but for sledding and snowmen and snowballs and such. They're there for the children and parents alike, for angelic impressions, igloos and forts, frozen lake skating, and icicle duels. Still, there are others who favor the peace, a book by the fire with cocoa at hand, viewing through windows tickled by frost. These dreams of deep winter float through my head like the flurries swirling above. I continue to smile while my pen captures these thoughts, and the anticipation of youth awaits the white wonder. Matthew Burgio.
I liked how both of your poems had to do with winter. I don't know if that was intentional or not.
Sometimes it is. We don't always go for a theme, but sometimes they kind of flock that way or they go with the season. Or I know it's probably weird for you because you probably don't get a lot of snow down there in Houston.
Yeah, I did grow up in Wyoming though for a bit, so I'm not from Texas at all.
Okay, so you definitely know about snow if you're from Wyoming, right?
Yeah, know a good bit about snow. But yeah, I mean, I really like it. I love the pacing of it with you reading it because all of my poems tend to be a much faster pace. So when I read, it was a little bit faster. So I didn't really emphasize the correct words that, I mean, you just emphasize like peace, you know?
About snow, we have a little different opinion in snow because I used to have to drive 30 miles back and forth to work in snow. It's nice to look at, especially when I'm retired now. I can open the door, look outside, and go, nope, not going out. But I do enjoy feeding the birds and watching them peck around in the snow. My wife used to really like snow days for the boys. I mentioned this before in other episodes because she can go outside and play with them. People say she was a stay-at-home mom, but we had to raise cattle, chicken, kids, big garden, and all that. So she stayed at home, but she had a lot of work to do.
Yeah, honestly, it made me want to go back to the snow because I've been stuck in the South, like southern states with no snow for the past like 11 years, 13 years. And I've seen snow once in like a decade.
Oh, wow.
Did you move because of the job or school or what?
For a job, yeah. Yeah, the Coast Guard moved me around.
Ah, thanks for your service.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It was fun. I'm retired out of that now, so now I can just write poetry. But it did make me really want to go snowboarding. And I want my son to be able to experience the snow also, which he really hasn't been able to do but once in his life.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to get back to the snow.
We haven't had a snow down here like that for 17 years. I grew up in Cleveland, so snow was like you had summer, winter, fall, and snow that lasted until March. But down here, it's hit and miss. We've had major blizzard back in the 70s and then periodic snow, but just enough to be snow. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. The most fun I've ever had in the snow is actually when I lived in Japan because I grew up in an Air Force family. So we lived over in Tokyo, and Japan gets the most beautiful snow. And then once it all melts, the cherry blossoms come out, and it's just even better. And it starts snowing pink for a while.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's gorgeous.
How old is your son?
He's 6, going on 7.
Okay. Enjoy them when they're young. Because when I wrote this poem, my boys were about that age, and now they're in their 40s. It's like, whoop, it just happens, you know?
Yeah, it's happening faster and faster every day.
Yeah.
All right, from here, we want to move to our guest section of the episode. Jacob, you're the poet. Show us what you've got.
Yeah, I'm Jacob Pearcey. Like I was saying, I grew up in a military family, so I moved around a lot. And then I joined myself, so I moved around even more. So Houston's actually the place I've lived the longest. 5 years is how long I've lived here for. I wrote my first poems in high school, but those were not really me. And then I didn't write again until 2 years ago. And I wrote one poem and then didn't write again for 2 more years until this last summer, where it just all came out like a flood. So I just started writing. So since June, I've written like 67 poems,
Oh, wow.
and they just keep piling up because every single time I get like a certain thought, it just turns into a poem, and I have to stop what I'm doing and sit down and just write it out. So like all of my poems were written in like one train of thought, Even the longer ones were written, like 5 to 10 minutes because it all just flowed out like a river, really.
Yeah, you got to grasp that inspiration when it comes and go with it.
Yep. And since I'm more retired now, I'm able to do that. So I'm assuming that's why the poetry started coming out, is because I unlocked myself, really. But I'll start with the first poem. Yeah, this poem, the inspiration just came from a friend from high school's post on Facebook. Yeah, he has autism, and so do I a little bit. Not as much as him, but when I saw his post on Facebook, him just having a difficult day, this poem just came out in the comment. So I just wrote this in the comments and then copied it from there. So I'll go ahead and read it. Neurodivergent. Being neurodivergent can be turbulent. The way you see isn't the same as he or she. You can only believe in yourself with no need for reassurance because only you can see what you see and think how you think. That's neurodivergence. It's true freedom from the hive mind, though there are fewer of your kind and it can be lonely at times, but it is a life that is worthy of respect, a path difficult to trek. But I bet you'll never regret the decisions you make because you understand that only you control your path in life and there is no second take. It may be filled with strife and you may feel in disguise when talking with others because it's rare to find a true brother with whom you truly understand each other. Jacob Pearcey, Vibing Poetry.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I actually had to look up what neurodivergent was because I was like, I know I've heard this word, but I wasn't 100% sure what it was.
I'm reading your poem, the same thing. It's like, okay. But when you explain it, it all like hits, like, oh, okay. And I understand now.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much just a blanket term for like any neurodivergence from typical or neurotypical. So they started just grouping together different mental like traits like bipolar and various other things like autism also, where it's grouped together into one blanket category, just neurodivergent, because it's all like a little convoluted with how they describe those conditions.
Right, how everything's defined. But I like how you take it as the positive in there, and that you make your decisions, that it doesn't matter how everybody else's mind works or how they think, that you are you and the decisions you make and how you view things, that's the important thing.
Perception is reality.
I like the idea you got your inspiration from a high school friend because I've written a couple poems inspired by friends. Got another one for us?
Yep. So this one's called Manifest. Can you manifest a future? Write a book bound with sutures, a book covered in mud and written with blood. Life's a test. You're going to struggle and be hammered in the metal. Don't meddle with the process. You'll only make a mess of it. Even a little bit is too much. Don't touch. Trust the process. Jacob Pearcey, Vibing Poetry. Trying to remember what actually inspired this one. I think I was just having a very interesting night during like a little manic moment for me where like I've always just gone with my feelings and intuition on my decisions in life. So for me, that's like trusting the process, to where if you trust your feelings and intuition throughout your life and just follow those feelings, then you'll inevitably be on the right path to get you to where you want to go. So yeah, it's just a matter of not denying your feelings and not ignoring your intuition and just trusting yourself that you know where you're going, because the path isn't straight in life. Many of the times you have to divert or make a stop before you get to where you want to go, and that's just the way things are. Sometimes you need that stop before you can actually move on to the next one.
Yeah, I like how you capture some of that. I think my favorite line there is that don't meddle with the process. You'll only make a mess of it. Even a little bit is too much. Don't touch.
Yeah.
So I like that, trusting the process, just going with the flow.
Your explanation was almost a poem, the way it flowed like that, explaining your poem.
Yeah, I guess I've just been writing so much that I'll even accidentally just rhyme in conversation, and just
And nothing wrong with that.
it's been fun.
That's funny. That kind of reminds me of Mark McDermott from episode 4 talking about that you write so much poetry that you kind of start talking in his case, like rhyming couplets, just in his conversation.
Mark was our guest from Belgium.
Oh, that's cool.
Before we read this last poem, I was going to ask you if there's anything you wanted to promote. You said something about your Facebook tag or your page. Do you have a page set up on Facebook there, or is that just your kind of handle?
I do have a page where I've been putting everything, and it's attached to my like normal Facebook profile, but it's my page Vibing Poetry, just vibing poetry. Yeah, my original like tag on Instagram was like Vibing Groovy, which I was doing some videos with poetry and stuff on, and other videos, but then I decided to keep it more geared specifically towards poetry with Vibing Poetry.
Okay, cool.
I'm working on getting a book published. I have my rough draft all put together, and I'm at like 44 pages, which is a pretty good number. I'm just working on that process to figure out if I want to self-publish or go through a publisher and how all of that works.
Okay, well, good luck with that. Like, when that all comes together, let us know. We'll help you put it out there and help you promote that.
Sure, appreciate that.
Let us know your process because we're thinking about doing it too.
Yeah.
Not we're thinking about it. We've been thinking about it for a long time, like a co-book.
Yeah, that might be something we look into this year, doing like a joint, sort of like a co-authored book of poetry.
Yeah, I mean, you can always publish an ebook on Amazon Kindle and do that pretty easily. Or if you want to print books, then I mean, you just have to find a printer, or I guess print them yourself and do all of that yourself, which I'm considering.
Right.
It'd be nice to go in a bookstore and see your book sitting on a shelf.
That would be amazing. Yeah, I can read the last one.
Yeah, give us another one.
So this one is actually the second most recent one that I've written. Enjoy your life. Enjoy it all for what it is, even if it isn't what you expected. You could have protected yourself, but you elected to leave your safety blanket in the past as a lost trinket. Embrace the path ahead with open arms. Whether it tarnishes your reputation or brings the wrath of others, you'll face it all standing tall. Live by your rule as you are your own ruler, a universe in and of itself, an elf with a wealth of knowledge, despite your lack of college and your desire to be free from society, which you are and always will be. You've realized your divinity. It's time to truly open up and go, to stop showing restraint and paint your mural on the fabric of reality. Jacob Pearcey, Vibing Poetry. Yeah, this one is almost like a message to myself, which I mean a lot of them are, but this one specifically is kind of the poem that I wrote before I fully decided to like publish a book and to stop holding back and to just put myself out there, since I've kind of like held back for so long, just getting my way through life without really following any of my passions for the most part. So this was kind of my way of, I guess, telling myself to just let go of all of that restraint and to just be myself and put myself out there and stop holding back. And of course, it can go for everyone else who might be in a similar situation.
Right. I think that's a good thing to think about. I think a lot of us sort of that, there's procrastination or we procrastinate because of anxieties or fears or, maybe some not sure how people are going to think about us and things like that. Especially as poets, I think we tend to be sort of these introverts in a lot of ways, especially with our feelings and our thoughts. And that's not always the case, but I think for a lot of us it is. I like this charge of, even just from the beginning, the enjoy it all for what it is, even if it isn't what you expected. Both that beginning and then your end. I like the paint your mural on the fabric of reality. I thought that was such a great line. One of the things I noticed too when you're reading these, I like how you read them pretty fast, but you don't really trip up on them. And I think that's great. It was reminding me of people that do sort of the spoken poetry or these kind of poetry slams. I think you could be good at reading it at some of those.
Yeah, it's kind of the intent also. I've read all of these so many times out loud, just to myself over and over and over. Yeah, I mean, it's becoming a second nature at this point. A lot of the times with all of my poetry, the rhythm can be pretty similar through at least like the phases of my poetry, because it all depends on my mood. Like it all started out with just these long rants that were like 2 pages long of one poetic rant that was almost more like a rap, but still read as poetry.
Okay.
And then it developed from there, and I kind of hit like a little depressed phase, and then my poetry got super short and just kind of like impactful with very few words. And then it developed from there, where it started being a little more optimistic again, and then just it all depends on my mood and what the spark was.
That's neat, I think. You don't want all your poetry to be exactly the same. I think it's great that as you're going through these phases, you can kind of see the sort of the transformation of the poetry as you go.
Right, and that's what my book will be like. It's almost like a journal, like a poetry journal, because this is how I express my feelings. So instead of journaling, I wrote poems. So you can actually tell like what my headspace was like when I wrote it, because that's exactly what I was feeling when I put on the page.
Nice concept, poetic journal.
Thank you. If you have anxiety about publishing something, it might just not be time. Like there's a right time and a right place for everything. Like if you start at the wrong time, then you might not get the exposure that you wanted, or it might not go as you wanted, because there's other things in your life that you have to do too that could have taken you away from it. So it's like when you finally do something and you feel that it is time to do something, then it probably is just that time and it is the right time and place. And that goes back to trusting your feelings.
Yeah, I don't think it's anxiety so much with us. It's finding the time because all that technical stuff, I leave that to Matt, and he's really busy.
Yeah.
But you are probably right about it, not being the right time. Because when I think about it, now, well, this past year, Phil and I started this podcast last March. And so we've really dove into the poetry world in this past year, and we've met a lot of people from all over the world through the podcast. With that thought about it being the right time, had I published my poetry on my own a couple years back, I feel like it would have been isolated, probably wouldn't have got much spread or even just much noticed by anybody. But now, at least, if we would do it in a time now where we're kind of intertwined in some of the poetry world out there, I think it'd be a time where it'd be more noticed, if that makes sense.
Talking about, other poets out there. I just got a text message from A. Benedict. We're both hockey fans. He's a Philly fan. I'm a Blue Jackets fan. And we're going back and forth. I don't want to call it trash talking, but polite trash talking, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, and A. Benedict, he's been our only, at this point, returning guest. He was featured on episode, I want to say 9, and then episode 23. He came back twice now, and he does a lot of spoken poetry, gets out there, does some poetry readings. But we've kind of really connected with him. All right, any other thoughts before we move on from the episode?
I was wondering if it's okay if I read one more that I didn't send over that actually pairs into them also.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, you're the poet.
This one's like a little more normal. What is it that you want out of life? Do you want to live on the edge of a knife? Do you want to sell your life for dollar bills, or do you want to stop the corporate shills? Your life is yours to make as you will. Don't let others take the wheel. You are the driver and the passenger. You are your divine messenger, because if you can't live by your own words, then fly away and join the birds. Run away and join the herds, for your life is no longer your own. You aren't living as you should. You've known, as shown by your conscience. You know that it's all nonsense. Walking the street, admiring the elite, not even realizing that your feet are just useless hunks of meat if you can't go where you want to go. Your head is a hollow space if you can't know what you want to know. Your heart is a lifeless pump, and you can feel a lump inside your throat as you rock on the shaky boat, begging to hear the note that'll save you from the joke that your life has become when you aren't living the one that you want to. Jacob P. Pearcey, Vibing Poetry.
All right, thank you for sharing. What's that one called?
That one is called It's Your Path.
It's Your Path. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so it's just your choice,
Definitely. Yeah, I can see that flows in with the sort of the concept of the other ones, with the master of your own self, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Just people need to really just take control of their own life and live the one that they want. Too many people compromise on their goals or compromise on their passions for realistic goals and all of that other people tell them are realistic. But really, like, unless you can live the life that you want to, then what are you really doing? Life is a gift.
Yeah, and I think that's a great message.
Good philosophy there.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, from here, we're going to move on. I have just a little bit of feedback for this episode. This is from Mariah S. She's talking about episode 24, which was our Christmas Eve episode. I just finished episode 24, and I really enjoyed it. I love that your dad wrote that about Christmas, and it just always reminds me how sweet he is. And when he talked about how much your mom looked forward to going outside and playing with you guys on the snow days, that was really sweet. I like that episode. I wish I would have listened to it on Christmas Eve, but it was nice starting it going into work and finish it leaving work today. So thank you, Mariah.
Thank you, Mariah, for thinking that I'm sweet.
As we wrap things up, we want to let our listeners know we are grateful that you've taken the time to tune in. We hope you're enjoying the poetry shared here, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with others. Now that the Year of the Poet community is expanding at a rapid rate, we have set up a patron site for those who would like to show their support for Year of the Poet. You can find us on buymeacoffee.com/yearthepoet. Thank you for your support as we continue to grow. If you've written any poetry and you want to share it here, whether you just have an interest in poetry, consider yourself an amateur poet, or are a professional poet with published works, contact us to be a guest on a future episode. Please check out the website at www.you'rethepoet.com. There's a section there that answers questions about being a guest. Follow us on Facebook for updates and info, and send us an email to host@you'rethepoet.com for feedback or questions about the podcast and how to be our next guest. Also, we've been working on putting up the podcast episodes on YouTube. They're still just audio, but you can find them there under You're the Poet Podcast. And you can also now find us on Instagram under You're the Poet Podcast. Until next time, Phil, thanks for joining us.
Anytime.
Jacob, thanks for being our guest.
Yeah, it's a pleasure anytime.
All right, thank you guys. Goodbye.